ladies and gentlemen, my name is Marina Ferrari. I'm here to explain you the hip design, a new codification of the hips movement in the new WDSF Latin technique book. To describe the hip design, we need to refer to anatomy principles. In anatomy, we have axis and plane that describe the movement of the articulation of the body. Through these planes and axes, we can define 4 fundamental movements. Saverio and Zeudi will help me in the explanation. Thank you. If we consider the hips and we imagine to have our hips inside a horizontal plane, the translation is the movement of the plane to the side in relation to the shoulder level. So this is the translation. The hips are imagined to be inside the horizontal plane, and the hips are moved sideways. They are sliding in relation to the shoulder. The second fundamental element is the inclination of the hips. In this case, we work through a vertical plane and a sagittal axis. The inclination is that kind of movement. Basically, is a change of height in the hips. To explain in a simple way, is happening when one leg is straight and the other is bent. The inclination is to the right when the right side of the hips is lower in relation to the other. This is the case. The right side of the hip is lower in relation to the other. The second case is the inclination to the left. It will be the opposite. In this case, the left side of the hips is lower in relation to the other. The third fundamental movement is the rotation. In this case, we again imagine the hips inside a horizontal plane and a vertical axis is passing through the plane. To simply explain this process, imagine that the spine of the body of the dancer is the vertical axis and the hips are held inside the horizontal plane. The movement we can create of the hips around the spine is the rotation. It can be, of course, to right or to left. A fourth type of fundamental movement is the retroversion and anteversion of the pelvis. In this case, we work through a sagittal plane, which cut the body of the dancer we image in 2 sides, one right and one left. And we have a horizontal axis that pass through. When the hips is moved forward, we will have a retroversion of the pelvis. When the hips are moved backward, we have an anteversion of the pelvis. This is the example. Retroversion, anteversion. Retroversion, anteversion. Through the combination of these 4 fundamental movements, we can develop the hip design, the subject of this explanation. And we can have different hip design. What we mean with hip design? We imagine to describe in the space a certain design with our hips. We take some example. One of the famous example is the 8, the figure 8. This hip design is constructed by the all fundamental movement. We will use the rotation, the translation, and a little bit of anteversion and retroversion of the pelvis. Going into more specific details, we can really describe each part of that design. Let's start with a rotation to left. rotation to left. From a rotation to left, we're gonna think to create a translation diagonally forward. And we continue with a rotation to right. And then another diagonal translation forward to left to come back to the center of the body and continue it to move more diagonally forward. And we complete with a rotation to the left to come back with a diagonal translation forward that finish the design. Now we will repeat the description of the 8 design fully. So rotation, diagonal translation, and rotation. The figure 8 can be danced in that matter, but can be danced also in the opposite direction. In this case, we develop what we call reverse 8. We show now this type of design. As you can see, the hips are trying to describe in the space a figure 8, but in this case is gone in the opposite way in relation to before. The typical example of the reverse figure 8 is when we execute a forward turning. So we're going to ask to Zeudi and Saverio to show it, to have more clear definition of it. As you can see, you can repeat it, they take a step forward with the right foot, and when they execute the turn on the foot, principle of the forward turning, they are creating with the hips a reverse 8 design. The 8 design, as you can see, it can be used also partially. In fact, in the chart, this is the 8 design is described in the red part. It can be described partially. So very often you will find just half reverse 8 to right, for example, or just half reverse 8 to left, for example. Another design that we want to show you is the direct design. The direct design is typical of a backward walk and is composed by 2 of the fundamental actions that I described to you before. In this case, we will use rotation of the hips and inclination of the hips. I'm going to ask to Saverio and Zeudi to dance 3-4 backward walks, a series of backward walks for us. Okay. Then, as you can see, when they step backward with the right foot, the hips are doing a rotation to right and an inclination to left. So the combination of the fundamental action that I described before from the anatomy idea create the design. The direct design to the left is when the hips are rotated to the left and incline to the right. So this is the case of a backward step with the left foot. In the same way, we already seen this, when we dance a backward step with the right foot, the hips will rotate to the right and incline to the left. In this case, we have a direct to right. So with these 2 examples, I gave an idea of what is the hip design. The hip design is a fundamental idea because it can help the teacher, the dancers, and the judges to recognize the movement elements of the hips of the dancer performance.